Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS.
Good morning and welcome to CBS News Mornings. It is just about 7 o'clock here in New York City. I'm Elaine Quijano in for Anne-Marie Green. Happy Wednesday to you. Here's a look at the stories grabbing our attention right now. President Biden is considering a new military aid package for Ukraine that could include more advanced weapons as Russia ramps up a new campaign to control the eastern Donbas region. We have team coverage on the front lines and economic impact. And while some are celebrating the end of federal mask mandates on public transit, others are gearing up for a potential legal fight. We'll break down the latest, including the concern for commuters who are considered high risk for COVID-19. Plus, we're tracking the latest in the battle between conservative attorney John Eastman and the congressional committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. We'll tell you why thousands of documents are now under review in a fight over transparency versus attorney-client privilege. And in Money Watch this morning, we're digging into the real debate over Europe's dependence on Russian energy and potential consequences of boycotts or bans. And a Hollywood drama plays out in the courts this morning as Johnny Depp continues his testimony in the multi-million-dollar defamation lawsuit against his ex-wife, Amber Heard. We'll break down Depp's testimony and what he calls his pursuit of the truth.
She was wonderful. And then things just started to change. Never did I myself reach the point of striking Ms. Heard in any way.
Now to a major developing story. A UK judge has formally approved the extradition of Julian Assange to the U.S. to face spying charges. The case will now go to Britain's Interior Minister for a decision, and the WikiLeaks founder can still appeal. Now, Assange is facing a list of charges related to the website publishing top secret diplomatic and military documents more than 10 years ago. Now to the war in Ukraine, which has reached a pivotal new phase as Russian troops take aim at the besieged port city of Mariupol. The last remaining Ukrainian fighters are holed up in a steel plant, refusing to surrender. This comes as Mariupol faces a catastrophic humanitarian crisis, with the eastern industrial hotspot now in ruins. However, long-awaited evacuation corridors have finally been established to help tens of thousands of people escape the bloodshed. Back in Kyiv, foreign diplomats are returning to reopen embassies after Russia suffered major losses and retreated from the capital city. But Moscow remains focused on capturing the eastern Donbas region. Charlie D'Agata has the latest.
From the hard-hit city of Kharkiv to the north, to the besieged port city of Mariupol to the south, where Russian troops stormed the steelworks facility where holdout Ukrainian forces are struggling to make a last stand. Russian missiles and artillery bombarded targets across a 300-mile front line in a ferocious new phase of the war. Ukrainian officials say forces have withstood the worst of the onslaught so far, President Zelensky vowing, "No matter how many Russian troops they send here, we will fight. We will defend ourselves." After failing to capture the capital, Kyiv, Russia has turned its focus and firepower on the country's industrial heartland in the east, repositioning thousands of troops and heavy weapons to the Donbas region, taking over the frontline town of Crimea and expanding areas already under Russian occupation, including the seizure of Europe's largest nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia after a hard-fought battle that put the facility itself in peril. This river effectively serves as a front line between Russian-held territory, including the nuclear power plant, and Ukrainian-held territory. But this war has already hit home here. Today, they held a funeral service for 29-year-old Vyacheslav Dymov, the airborne lieutenant killed 3 days ago when his vehicle struck a Russian anti-tank mine. His mother, Alla, told us he wanted to be a soldier since he was 4. There will never be a child like him, she said. My shining son. They took my only blood. They took my son. May he rest in peace. They took my angel. Dymov and his wife Ivana had only been married for a year and a half. They were planning to start a family. One phone call and it all gets shattered like a puzzle, she said, and you end up all alone. She saved the screenshot of their last video call.
Are you going to be okay?
This very morning, I asked him to give me all that heroism and strength he possessed and to look after me.
Here in the U.S., travelers have mixed reactions over mask wearing after a federal judge lifted the CDC's mandate. The Biden administration says it will appeal the ruling if health officials say the requirement is still needed. Bradley Blackburn has the latest.
The Biden administration is waiting to hear from the CDC if it should fight to reinstate the federal mask mandate for airlines and public transit. After a judge struck it down earlier this week, CDC officials are now weighing the impact on public health, assessing the threat from Omicron subvariant BA2.
Mr. President, should people continue to wear masks on planes?
That's up to them.
Yesterday, Lyft and Uber joined the major airlines in dropping mask requirements. Driver Andy Crawford says he'll copy what his passengers do.
As far as me having an issue with the customers, not really. If they don't wear it, I don't wear it.
While many celebrated the end to the mandate,
Oh, it was amazing not flying with a mask.
some with a cautious optimism.
Somebody cough or sneeze one time, you're kind of like...
Others are worried about what's ahead and will continue to mask up.
I had cancer, and then also my mom, her health issues is not good.
Health experts say everyone should take their surroundings into account.
Hey, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I'm not saying at all that you shouldn't worry about it. Again, I think that for many people who may be at higher risk, older age, immunocompromised conditions that are still very vulnerable to infection.
According to Johns Hopkins, more than 2,900 Americans died from COVID-19 in the past week.
A federal grand jury has indicted 2 men accused of impersonating Homeland Security agents on several counts, including false impersonation of a federal officer and possessing a large capacity ammunition device. They were arrested earlier this month after investigators say the 2 men gave lavish gifts to Secret Service officers, including rent-free luxury apartments. Emergency meetings are underway in the Middle East this week as violence escalates between Israelis and Palestinians. 2 senior State Department officials are visiting Israel, the West Bank, Egypt, and Jordan in a growing effort to de-escalate tensions. The Biden administration fears more violence could spark another major conflict similar to what happened in the region 1 year ago. Palestinian militants fired a rocket into Israel earlier this week while Israel launched airstrikes targeting Gaza. That followed clashes between Palestinians and Israeli police at a holy site in Jerusalem. We're following some tragic news out of the Navy as officials investigate the deaths of 3 sailors assigned to the same vessel. We'll have more on this developing story after the break. And Johnny Depp delivers dramatic testimony in the defamation trial involving his ex-wife Amber Heard. We'll have all the highlights from yesterday, plus what to expect from court today. But first, it is 7:08 on the East Coast. Time to check your local weather.
an original CBS Reports documentary.
Some Republicans are now accusing companies like Twitter and Facebook of targeting conservatives.
They've had unchecked power to censor.
I do not have access to my main Facebook account.
I wasn't given an explanation. I was just like, what did I do?
It's not okay to shut down my voice simply because it's not the same as yours.
How those rules are enforced is something that the rest of us know very, very little about.
The First Amendment protects all of us from the government limiting our speech. The companies have the ability to decide what speech they will allow. They're not the government.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
Oh my God, the truck is sinking.
Devastating flooding has reached catastrophic levels.
Rising sea levels are threatening America's coasts.
You would have to take that house and put it on stilts 10 feet tall. If the street is filled with salt water, what difference does it make how high you make your house?
The highest rental rates is exactly where the elevation is highest.
This was the evidence to prove that carbon gentrification was real.
Pay $1,800 in 5 days or you have to leave. Were you scared?
Yes.
Every single person who stood up and said, I am not paying this rent increase, received an eviction.
Haitians built this place and you're getting kicked out.
Yes.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah.
We found it.
You're kidding me?
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
The COVID economic shutdown hit Las Vegas harder than any other major city in the nation.
It's decimated the entertainment community.
So even though it looks fairly busy, this is really just a fraction of what business was like prior to COVID.
Last week, there was another large hotel chain that 18,000 were let go.
I haven't seen any jobs that are even close to what I was making.
We're trying to keep things as normal for our kids. I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son.
And I see every day people losing their homes, having to leave Las Vegas.
If I have to start over somewhere else, I have to start over.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
The time is now 7:12 in the nation's capital. There is a lot going on in Washington today, including reaction after the president's announcements on student loans, as well as nuclear sites yesterday. We're going to have more on those stories later this hour. Meantime, same time, of course, here in New York City. CBS News Mornings is back with a look at some of the stories you may have missed while you were offline. The Navy is investigating the deaths of 3 sailors assigned to the USS George Washington aircraft carrier, which is docked off the coast of Virginia. Over a 6-day period, 1 sailor died on board and 2 others were found dead off-site. Navy officials say the deaths do not appear to be related. The Department of Education is making changes to federal student loan programs. The agency says it found failures linked to the administration of income-driven repayment plans. According to the department, the updates could immediately forgive at least 40,000 borrowers' debts. Major League Baseball could be one step closer to implementing a pitch clock next season. Minor league teams started using the clocks on Friday and shaved about 20 minutes off the average game time. Well, a conservative lawyer who worked for former President Trump is withholding more than 3,200 documents from the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. John Eastman says his email records are covered under attorney-client privilege. A judge who was reviewing that argument forced Eastman to turn over 101 emails last month. Well, now a new court filing is giving us insight into how many documents are still under review. Scott McFarland is standing by for us to talk more about this story. Hi there, Scott. I know you've been covering every twist and turn. So what do we know about the content of these documents and Eastman's argument for withholding them?
Increasingly, Elaine, John Eastman is becoming a pivotal figure, if not the pivotal figure in the investigation by the House January 6th Select Committee. You'll recall Eastman was the architect of that memo to give the then Vice President Mike Pence some type of strategy or method for overturning the Electoral College count on January 6, 2021. The committee has wanted to get its hands on some of Eastman's emails, thousands of them. Eastman works for a university on the West Coast, at least he did at the time, so getting those emails has been fraught with legal challenges. When they made their most recent motion in court to get the Eastman memos, the House January 6th Select Committee said something particularly provocative. They said it is likely that former President Trump and John Eastman were part of some type of conspiracy, if not a criminal conspiracy, and that's why those emails needed to be handed over. They're trying to get more emails from Eastman, trying to get deeper into whatever records he has, but you have to keep an eye on this man. The records he has seem to be of particular importance to the House January 6th Select Committee. They said demonstrative things to get the first batch. And this is a committee, Elaine, that's already had hundreds of interviews and already secured tens of thousands of documents, and they are showing they want this man's emails in a big way.
So in addition, Kimberly Guilfoyle also had a closed-door meeting with the House Select Committee, but it isn't her first time doing so. So, Scott, what more do we know about the meeting this week?
Kimberly Guilfoyle showed up once before, but there was a disagreement, an argument, in fact, over ground rules. So she went back and came back for a second time, and that happened this week. It was a lengthy appearance in the House January 6th Select Committee's offices on the U.S. House side of Capitol Hill. We don't have a readout of what was said between the investigative staff and Ms. Guilfoyle, but we do know, without much ambiguity, that the House January 6th Select Committee is particularly interested in people who had former President Trump's ear in the days before January 6th and the morning of January 6th, people who may have heard what he said and may have been advising him. And we know Kimberly Guilfoyle was at that White House Ellipse event the morning of January 6th. So she had some proximity to the former president and key stakeholders. She has always been a person in which the January 6th committee has had interest. That being said, she's also a uniquely public figure, a former cable news fixture, a very vocal supporter of the former president. So we'll see eventually what piece of the puzzle they've secured by talking to Kim Guilfoyle. But we know they've wanted to speak to her for some time, and they finally secured some FaceTime, hours of it, earlier this week.
And very briefly, Scott, before we let you go, I remember weeks ago talking to you, and you reported that the committee had hoped to start hearings in April. It is now April 20th. What's the latest? What are you hearing about a time frame here?
If you keep your eyes focused, you'll see the goalposts just move and move and move on you.
Right.
The latest estimate is May, possibly June. But Elaine, there's a firm deadline. They've got to finish their work before the midterm elections, and perhaps with some wiggle room between now and then. So the firm deadline is likely end of summer, very early fall, which means hearings have to happen in the coming weeks.
All right, Scott MacFarlane. Scott, thank you very much. Migrant apprehensions along the U.S.-Mexico border reached a 22-year high last month. That's according to new figures released by the Department of Homeland Security. The data show record numbers of migrants from Cuba, Nicaragua, Colombia, and Ukraine crossed the border. This comes as President Biden is reportedly considering delaying the repeal of Title 42 restrictions. The COVID-era policy, which has allowed border officials to quickly expel migrants, is set to end on May 23rd. But Axios reports the administration is considering pushing back that date amid fears about a surge in border crossings. The Biden administration announced that it will launch a $6 billion effort to revive nuclear power plants at risk of closing. Nuclear reactor owners and operators will be able to submit bids and receive credits to help them stay open. The program will be funded through the bipartisan infrastructure law. Over the last decade, a dozen commercial reactors in the U.S. have closed, due in part to competition from natural gas and escalating costs. Let's get you back now to Ukraine, where the battle over Donbass has intensified. Russian troops have also escalated attacks on the city of Mariupol. Let's head over to Kyiv now, where Anna Foster from our partners at the BBC is standing by. Good morning, Anna. Mariupol has nearly been leveled completely by the Russian onslaught. What are you hearing about why that last stronghold is still holding out? And are there any efforts to send reinforcements?
Elaine, what we're hearing right now is that final Ukrainian stronghold in Mariupol may not last for much longer. In the last few hours, a Marine commander who is leading those few remaining Ukrainian soldiers who are holed up in that huge steel plant in the city has released a video to the international media. And in it, he says that he believes that they have hours, maybe days left. He says they are outnumbered by the Russians by 10-1. He says that the Russian army have better equipment than they do, more tanks, more equipment, everything that you would need to try and take that last Ukrainian stronghold. What they are urging is for the international community, world leaders, to extract them, to get them out of there and take them to a third-party state. And I think it's interesting, too, that Russia has once again offered those final remaining Ukrainian forces in Mariupol a window to surrender, but they have not taken it, which I think suggests that they do not trust Russia's intent at this point. They do not believe that they would be able to leave with their lives, and that's why they are asking world leaders to help get them out.
Well, President Biden said yesterday that the U.S. will be sending more weapons to Ukraine. The spokesman for the Pentagon also talked about that yesterday. Is there any confusion on the ground about U.S. aid to Ukraine?
I think it's very difficult for people here to know what exactly the US is sending and also how it is being used, because of course in much of this country they hear about what's happening on the front line, but they don't see it. And remember too, that aid is coming, but it has to come a long way across Ukraine to get where it's needed. Most of it comes across the border in the east, in the west from Poland, and then it has to be taken thousands of kilometers across to the front line and disseminated where it's needed. Now, President Zelensky has said repeatedly and with increasing urgency that right now Ukrainian forces do not have what they need in terms of equipment. It's been promised, but that is very different to it actually existing there on the front line. So right now, Elaine, I think it feels like time is really of the essence.
Well, diplomats are returning to Kyiv to prepare for future visits by world leaders. What does this mean for Ukraine and for Russia? Is there a sense, Anna, that there will be no more attacks in Kyiv?
That is a very good question. It is difficult to answer at the same time, because when you travel around this city, it still in many ways feels like a capital city at war. There are checkpoints, there are roadblocks, there's still a curfew overnight. You can't be out on the streets here between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. But some small signs of life are starting to return. As you say, some embassies are reopening here in Kyiv. You start to see some small shops, some small restaurants reopening. There is a sense that people are wanting to come back to this city, but there is a warning from the mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, the former professional boxer, of course. He is saying to people who live here in Kyiv, don't come back just yet. He says the Russian threat is still there, particularly after the sinking of the Russian flagship, the Moskva, last week. So he is saying to people, it is your choice, but my recommendation is, for now, stay in safer places.
All right, Anna, thank you very much for your reporting. We appreciate it. From teaching in Wisconsin public schools to farming in a Ukrainian war zone, one woman is opening up about her experience holed up near Kyiv despite Russia's escalating offensive across the country. I'll speak with her coming up after the break. And coming up later on Red and Blue, several of our top political reporters will join us to discuss the battle for Congress as we inch closer to the November midterms. You can stream that conversation in our 6 p.m. Eastern hour. We'll be right back.
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
Let's get the forecast from our partners at the Weather Channel.
Here we are in our virtual view.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battering rams.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
This is our virtual view, what it actually looks like.
Those are some of the best graphics I've seen.
Spare no expense, Gail.
We experience the weather in a whole new way.
This upcoming segment is presented by Prudential.
surge of hate incidents and attacks against Asian American and Pacific Islanders during the pandemic have made headlines. They've also renewed conversations about public safety. Well, in New York, a group of Asian American women are coming together to show strength and honor their experiences, finding both solace and joy in community. Here's Jean Song.
I always tell her 보고 싶어, meaning I miss you in Korean.
I had to wipe so many tears off my Kindle. It was so annoying because I kept losing my place, Daniel said.
It was an evening of prose.
Thank you.
And literary imagination. But this community reading series was also an outlet for Asian women writers to share their voices.
Asian female writers have beautiful, complex stories that are so multifaceted, so many layers to it that aren't, before this time, frequently shown within the publishing industry. So having a space in which we are saying, pause, listen to us, this is what we're trying to say, this is what we're trying to share, is something that's truly important.
Lucy Yu is the owner of You and Me Books in Manhattan's Chinatown. She hosted the event in collaboration with The Cosmos, a community organization for Asian women co-founded by Cassandra Lam and Karen Mock.
We create events and experiences, content like this, to center the experiences of Asian women. Storytelling for our community is a way to understand our experience as Asian Americans. A lot of us come from families where identity was not a part of the dinner table conversation. We didn't necessarily study Asian American studies in college. And I think in our community, I've just seen so many people think that their story is insignificant because it hasn't been shown on the public sphere. And my hope is that this reading series and the work that I do as an organizer is to try and reach every person with that message. Your story matters.
Well, thank you so much for supporting. I really appreciate it.
You runs the first Asian American women-owned bookstore in New York City.
I think there's a lack of places kind of showcasing our stories, our immigrant stories. And once I did research, I realized there was no lack of work out there. It's just a lack of what's being pushed forward.
Amid rising hate crimes against the AAPI community during the COVID-19 pandemic, both Mock and Yu have responded, from creating what the Cosmos calls collective rest healing spaces to handing out pepper spray and personal alarms.
In addition to a lot of the partnerships I've done with other organizations, Soar Over Hate, I think that was something just for other people to see more than 1,000 AAPI women and femmes line up for that, how important it was and how unsafe we are feeling, but also offering love and joy in those stories. I think a lot of people come in, especially in the last couple of weeks, they're like, do you have something mindless, funny, but also has representation? And I'm like, yeah, I want to see joy too, and that's a way of healing. And so I think in any aspect of feeling seen, of feeling just a little less alone, there's a lot of avenues to kind of approach that.
As both Yu and the Cosmos build their respective communities, their missions also align.
One is creating a space in which we feel protected, feel love, and feel safe. And another is okay, we have all this energy and all this anger. How do we channel that to actually cause change in the policies and cause change to make us feel safer?
I can find solace in looking at her face in the intimacy of the present.
It's not the kind of space that asks you to perform in a certain way. Once they hear the power of their own voice, they're able to actually see themselves as agents of creating that space as well.
The main one being, how do you forgive yourself? A delightful buzz took root in her head as she waited for the elevator. Thank you.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Some Republicans are now accusing companies like Twitter and Facebook of targeting conservatives.
They've had unchecked power to censor.
I do not have access to my main Facebook account.
I wasn't given an explanation. I was just like, what did I do?
It's not okay to shut down my voice simply because it's not the same as yours.
How those rules are enforced is something that the rest of us know very, very little about.
The First Amendment protects all of us from the government limiting our speech. The companies have the ability to decide what speech they will allow. They're not the government.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
Oh my God, the truck is sinking.
Devastating flooding has reached catastrophic levels.
Rising sea levels are threatening America's coasts.
You would have to take that house and put it on stilts 10 feet tall. If the street is filled with salt water, what difference does it make how high you make your house?
The highest rental rates is exactly where the elevation is highest.
This was the evidence to prove that climate gentrification was real.
Pay $1,800 in 5 days or you have to leave. Were you scared?
Yes.
Every single person who stood up and said, I am not paying this rent increase, received an eviction.
Haitians built this place and you're getting kicked out.
Yes.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
The COVID economic shutdown hit Las Vegas harder than any other major city in the nation.
It's decimated the entertainment community.
So even though it looks fairly busy, this is really just a fraction of what business was like prior to COVID.
Last week, there was another large hotel chain that 18,000 were let go.
I haven't seen any jobs that are even close to what I was making.
We're trying to keep things as normal for our kids. I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son.
And I see every day people losing their homes, having to leave Las Vegas.
If I have to start over somewhere else, I have to start over.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
Welcome back to CBS News Mornings. The time is now 7:31. Let's get you caught up on some news you may have missed. The Justice Department says it will wait for a decision by the CDC before moving forward with plans to appeal a judge's ruling ending federal mask mandates for public transit. A British judge has formally approved the extradition of Julian Assange to the United States to face spying charges. The case will now go to Britain's Interior Minister for a decision, and the WikiLeaks founder can still appeal. The war in Ukraine rages on in Mariupol this morning. Humanitarian escape corridors are expected to reopen to women, children, and the elderly as the last Ukrainian forces in the city face increasing fire at their final holdout location in a former steel plant. Well, a former Milwaukee public school teacher now living in Ukraine is sharing her story about survival and perseverance in a war zone. Diane Baima had a passion for Russian studies as a 9th grader, which led her to studying in Moscow before returning to the States to teach. But soon she was interested in a new adventure, which led her to Kyiv, a sprawling farm, and her husband Yuri. Diane is with us now from her farm south of Kyiv's city center. Diane, welcome. Thanks very much for being with us. What a unique story you have. First of all, your daily life has changed drastically since the start of this war. Can you tell us how you, your family, and your animals are holding up right now? How are you getting by?
Well, I'm a teacher. I was teaching at a village school nearby, and now the school was closed for the first 2 weeks of the school, but now our school is working online, and the children are scattered throughout Europe, and some of them are still in the village, and some have just came back yesterday, so that's exciting. But it's hard because the kids are scared. They want to go home, and all the children want to go home. The Ukrainian children are really suffering under this war.
What is it like where you are right now, Diane? Is it relatively quiet? Is it relatively peaceful in the area?
Yeah, this is our backyard, and it's very peaceful here, luckily. I mean, you can hear dogs, you can hear the animals, but we've been lucky that it's been peaceful here. Sometimes we hear shelling in the very far distant, but not lately.
Diane, you say that you fell in love with the Russian language and culture early on in your life. And you say that you feel betrayed by Russia. Has it been difficult for you to see this devastation? I mean, how do you sort of reconcile this love and connection and affection that you felt for Russia and Russian culture with what's taking place right now?
Well, it's kind of gone. I don't know how to say it any other way, but the friends that I made in Russia, they've been in contact with me and they're supporting Ukraine in the war. So that helps. But the fact that my old university, I went to Moscow State University, and they are saying that the war is something they're supporting, I'm done with Russia. I'm all Ukraine.
You know, you mentioned the children a moment ago, Diane. I wonder how exactly they're coping, you know, not just with the displacement, obviously all the uncertainty. As a teacher, what is it that you tell them?
Well, for me, I'm trying to provide the little time in the day when we can have fun, when we can be together, where we can share our toys. I have first graders and fourth graders, and they're lonely. They want to be with their friends. They're worried about their homes. So I'm there to try to bring a little light into their lives. And when they're sad, I tell them that that's okay to be sad, and that I'm sad sometimes too.
In the piece that you recently wrote, you said the war in Ukraine is a battle to keep the whole world independent. Why do you feel that way?
I feel that way because I think a lot of people feel that way. Ukraine is fighting for its freedom, but it's fighting for all of Europe's freedom for them because Russia doesn't seem to want to allow other countries to have their freedom. It's happened in the past, and it'll continue to happen unless somebody stops them. And right now, it's Ukraine that's stopping them.
And you intend to stay, Diane? You have no intentions of leaving?
I intend to stay as long as I can. I mean, if they came, I mean, they are targeting teachers. Russians are targeting teachers. So if I stay and the Russians come to my village, I mean, I will have to leave before that happens because my husband said so. But otherwise, I plan on staying, and I plan on staying, teaching, and doing what I can.
And this is your husband, Yuri. Yuri, is there anything you want to say very quickly here before we have to let you go? It's an incredible, remarkable commitment that both you and Diane are demonstrating here to Ukraine by staying where you are.
Thank you. You say. Okay. We wanted to just say thank you so much for all the people in the world who are supporting Ukraine, for all the countries that are supporting, especially the United States. We're so thankful. It would be so much more terrible. All of us.
All right, Diane, her husband Yuri, thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're taking a closer look at the state of Russia's economy as Vladimir Putin remains defiant amid Western sanctions. Coming up, we'll have more on his new stock market decree and how Europe is facing criticism for failing to fully ban oil and gas imports from Moscow. We'll be right back.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Some Republicans are now accusing companies like Twitter and Facebook of targeting conservatives.
They've had unchecked power to censor.
I do not have access to my main Facebook account.
I wasn't given an explanation. I was just like, what did I do?
It's not okay to shut down my voice simply because it's not the same as yours.
How those rules are enforced is something that the rest of us know very, very little about.
The First Amendment protects all of us from the government limiting our speech. The companies have the ability to decide what speech they will allow. They're not the government.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
Oh my God, the truck is sinking.
Devastating flooding has reached catastrophic levels.
Rising sea levels are threatening America's coasts.
You would have to take that house and put it on stilts 10 feet tall. If the street is filled with salt water, what difference does it make how high you make your house?
The highest rental rates is exactly where the elevation is highest.
This was the evidence to prove that carbon gentrification was real.
Pay $1,800 in 5 days or you have to leave. Were you scared?
Yes.
Every single person who stood up and said, I am not paying this rent increase, received an eviction.
Haitians built this place and you're getting kicked out.
Yes.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yes. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
The COVID economic shutdown hit Las Vegas harder than any other major city in the nation.
It's decimated the entertainment community.
So even though it looks fairly busy, this is really just a fraction of what business was like prior to COVID.
Last week, there was another large hotel chain that 18,000 were let go.
I haven't seen any jobs that are even close to what I was making.
We're trying to keep things as normal for our kids. I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son.
And I see every day people losing their homes, having to leave Las Vegas.
If I have to start over somewhere else, I have to start over.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
For the first time in over a decade, Netflix is losing subscribers. The streaming platform announced over 200,000 subscribers dropped the platform from January through March. Netflix says it is password sharing and increased competition from other streaming networks that are largely to blame for the loss. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is calling on state lawmakers to strip Disney World of its status to operate as an independent governing structure around its theme parks. DeSantis has been clashing with Disney since the company spoke out against Florida's bill, which critics have called the Don't Say Gay law. With recent inflation making just about everything cost more, some are looking to move to more affordable areas, and Pennsylvania could be the best destination. A new study showing the most and least expensive places to buy a home labels Pittsburgh the most affordable housing market. It also names Hong Kong as the most expensive place to live. As the war in Ukraine causes more death and destruction every day, European countries are remaining reliant on Russian energy, gas, and oil. According to an article in the Boston Globe, those energy purchases have allowed Russia to continue financing their military, supplying an estimated $1 billion a day to Moscow. Reporter for the Boston Globe and the author of that piece, Jim Puzingera, is here with more on the complex situation. Jim, thanks very much for being with us. So European countries are reliant on Russian oil and gas, particularly Germany. Is there any scenario where that reliance lessens to the point where a ban would be possible?
Yeah, thanks for having me. The reliance, they're working on lessening it, but I think the biggest factor could be increased public opinion as we see more atrocities in the war in Ukraine. The Europeans are going to face higher prices. The countries like Germany are trying to reduce their reliance on oil and gas, finding alternate supplies. It's difficult. Natural gas comes in via pipeline from Russia, so they have to find alternative sources like liquefied natural gas. But public opinion, I think, is going to play a big factor here. If we see more atrocities coming out of Ukraine, that will increase pressure on these countries and reduce some of the concerns about a public backlash to higher costs for gas, oil, and other energy products.
So European Union leaders have banned Russian coal. Is that doing anything?
It's a small step. They don't get much coal from Russia, and coal is not a big source of energy in the European Union. The biggest hit would be natural gas and oil. Those are the biggest energy products coming into Europe, and those are the biggest revenue producers for the Russian government. That's what's driving most of the revenue coming in from the European Union, and that's where the hesitancy has been. So coal was sort of a small and easy step that they could take to show they're moving in that direction, but it's not nearly enough for what the sanctions are meant to do.
Well, Jim, here in the U.S., we've banned Russian oil and gas. Is that having any impact?
That's a small impact. We don't import much oil from Russia. We don't import any gas. So it's more of a symbolic move on our part to cut it off. Canada's done the same thing. But the biggest market for oil and gas for Russia is Europe. 49% of the oil exports from Russia go to the European Union. 75% of their gas exports go to the European Union. That's where the money comes from, and those are the sanctions that would really hurt Vladimir Putin.
Right, as you said in your piece, $1 billion a day to Moscow, an extraordinary figure. Jim Puzingera. Jim, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
The time is now 7:45, and this is a live look at New York's Times Square, home of CBS Mornings. Tony DeCopel is standing by with a preview of the show. Tony, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Elaine. Good to see you. Ahead on CBS Mornings, there could be a new court battle over mandatory masks on public transportation. We'll have former CDC Director Dr. Tom Frieden joining us to talk about the new reality for travelers and whether he thinks we should still be masking up, mandate or not. Also, in our Earth 365 series, we'll take you to a Minnesota forest where something unusual is happening, and we'll tell you how researchers are using that forest as a climate change time machine. Finally, Daily Show contributor Jordan Klepper joins us. He'll be live in studio, and we'll ask him why he traveled all the way to Hungary to learn about politics all the way back here in America. All that more at 8.
Can't wait to see it. See you at 8. A new CBS News poll shows that 2/3 of those surveyed want recreational marijuana to be legal both in their home states and federally. More than 60% of U.S. adults say recreational marijuana should be legal, while more than 30% say they are not in favor of it. The vast majority in the poll across all age groups support federal legalization, though folks 65 and older are notably less on board, and those between 30 and 44 are the most supportive. Currently, recreational weed use is still illegal at the federal level. More bombshell testimony is expected today in Johnny Depp and Amber Heard's defamation trial. The Oscar-nominated actor is suing his ex-wife for an op-ed she published in 2018. We'll have a full recap of Depp's dramatic testimony about their relationship coming up next. Until then, we're going to take a quick break, which means you have 3 minutes to download the free CBS News app on all your devices. Our app gives you the best of CBS News all in one place. Before we get to break, let's leave you with some late-night laughs from our friend Stephen Colbert, who took a look at the new masking guidelines.
The judge clarified her ruling, explaining wearing a mask cleans nothing. At most, it traps virus droplets. That's the mask's job, you dummy. So my droplets don't get on you. That's like saying this diaper is useless. Every time I put one on my baby, it fills up with poop. That's not doing anything.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Some Republicans are now accusing companies like Twitter and Facebook of targeting conservatives.
They've had unchecked power to censor.
I do not have access to my main Facebook account.
I wasn't given an explanation. I was just like, what did I do?
It's not okay to shut down my voice simply because it's not the same as yours.
How those rules are enforced is something that the rest of us know very, very little about.
The First Amendment protects all of us from the government limiting our speech. The companies have the ability to decide what speech they will allow. They're not the government.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
Oh my God, the truck is sinking.
Devastating flooding has reached catastrophic levels.
Rising sea levels are threatening America's coasts.
You would have to take that house and put it on stilts 10 feet tall. If the street is filled with salt water, what difference does it make how high you make your house?
The highest rental rates is exactly where the elevation is highest.
This was the evidence to prove that climate gentrification was real.
Pay $1,800 in 5 days or you have to leave. Were you scared?
Yes.
Every single person who stood up and said, I am not paying this rent increase, received an eviction.
Haitians built this place and you're getting kicked out.
Yes.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yes. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
The COVID economic shutdown hit Las Vegas harder than any other major city in the nation.
It's decimated the entertainment community.
So even though it looks fairly busy, this is really just a fraction of what business was like prior to COVID.
Last week, there was another large hotel chain that 18,000 were let go.
I haven't seen any jobs that are even close to what I was making.
We're trying to keep things as normal for our kids. I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son.
And I see every day people losing their homes, having to leave Las Vegas.
If I have to start over somewhere else, I have to start over.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
Evacuations are underway in Arizona near Flagstaff, where a massive wildfire has already burned over 6,000 acres. The tunnel fire is 0% contained and is moving rapidly, according to officials. Let's bring in meteorologist Stephanie Abrams from our partners at the Weather Channel. Stephanie, what's fueling this wildfire?
Elaine, the West was off to a wet start this year, but it's really hard to tell by looking at the drought monitor. First, we're going to take you back into last July, and that's when the drought monitor was pretty bad. And then we got the rainy season, November, December, January, February, up until now. We're just starting to come out of it. And we got some help, but look at right now. Our drought monitor is popping right back up. Let's have a look at the storms that are coming in. We do actually have a decent storm that will be coming in for our day. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you can see it all streaming in right off the Pacific. We're going to get snow and we are going to get some rain and some much needed rain as well. Let's have a look at the numbers for us here. And notice we're going to get a solid 2 to 3 inches in some places here into California. And that's where we need it. We need it really badly because we are anywhere from 8, 9, 10, even 14 inches below average. Look at Sacramento. Almost 9 inches below average. And Sacramento went 66 straight days without rain. That was the longest winter season dry streak on record. Now, how about the snow? It's going to pile up into the Sierra. We're talking 1, potentially 2 feet of snow for us. And we need it here as well. Here's the thing. Look at our percentage of average. If you got a 27 on a test, a 34, a 24% on a test, you'd be failing. So we need a lot more snow to come here. But sadly, we're really moving out of our wet season here in the West. And even if you don't live in the West, you need to be concerned because there's so much farming that goes on for us here. So all of us will be affected. Now, Elaine, you can catch all-day coverage on the Weather Channel television network, including the latest on climate and sustainability as we explore our planet, our future on Pattern.
All right, Steph, thank you. You can also get the latest on the weather in your area on the CBS News app. It gives you access to all of our CBS News national and local streams for free anytime, anywhere. Now to the defamation trial brought by Johnny Depp against his ex-wife, Amber Heard. The actor took the stand yesterday, testifying that he never hit her. Depp is suing over an opinion piece she wrote calling herself a victim of domestic abuse. Dina Demetrius has the highlights.
It never had to go in this direction.
Johnny Depp took the witness stand Tuesday as his defamation trial against his ex-wife Amber Heard moved forward.
She was wonderful. And then things just started to change.
The 58-year-old actor is suing Heard for $50 million over a 2018 op-ed she wrote for the Washington Post, claiming she survived domestic violence.
Never did I myself reach the point of striking Ms. Heard in any way.
While he wasn't named in the piece, attorneys for the Aquaman actress alleged Depp physically and sexually assaulted her during their 15-month marriage. But Depp's longtime friends and employees pushed back.
I've never seen Johnny be violent towards anybody.
Depp also testified that he suffered physical and verbal abuse as a child at the hands of his mother.
She would call me cockeye, one eye.
He argues Heard's accusations have damaged his reputation and cost him movie roles. She's filed her own countersuit against Depp for $100 million. Dina Demetrius, CBS News.
It is 7:55. Here's a look at what's coming up today. The president of the United Nations World Bank will hold a press conference later this morning. This comes as central bank governors, finance ministers, and government officials attend meetings and seminars focusing on the global economy. That's set for 9:15 Eastern. And Secretary of State Antony Blinken wraps up his trip to Panama today. He's been meeting with top diplomats from 20 other countries to discuss immigration and its root causes. Stay with us throughout the day as we track the latest developments. Plus, President Biden meets with top Pentagon leaders at the White House later today. He'll host Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and other top officials this afternoon. This comes as the U.S. sends more military aid to Ukraine. And coming up in our 9 o'clock hour, Camilo Montoya Galvez joins us to discuss the record number of migrants from Cuba, Nicaragua, Colombia, and Ukraine traveling to the U.S. and fueling a 22-year high in border arrests. You can stream that at 9:30 Eastern. If you're heading out the door, take us with you. You can access all of our CBS News national and local streams for free anytime, anywhere on the CBS News app. CBS Mornings is next. I'll see you in an hour.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Some Republicans are now accusing companies like Twitter and Facebook of targeting conservatives.
They've had unchecked power to censor.
I do not have access to my main Facebook account.
I wasn't given an explanation. I was just like, what did I do?
It's not okay to shut down my voice simply because it's not the same as yours.
How those rules are enforced is something that the rest of us know very, very little about.
The First Amendment protects all of us from the government limiting our speech. The companies have the ability to decide what speech they will allow. They're not the government.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
Oh my God, the truck is sinking.
Devastating flooding has reached catastrophic levels.
Rising sea levels are threatening America's coasts.
You would have to take that house and put it on stilts 10 feet tall. If the street is filled with salt water, what difference does it make how high you make your house?
The highest rental rates is exactly where the elevation is highest.
This was the evidence to prove that climate gentrification was real.
Pay $1,800 in 5 days or you have to leave. Were you scared?
Yes.
Every single person who stood up and said, I am not paying this rent increase, received an eviction.
Haitians built this place and you're getting kicked out.
Yes.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
The COVID economic shutdown hit Las Vegas harder than any other major city in the nation.
It's decimated the entertainment community.
So even though it looks fairly busy, this is really just a fraction of what business was like prior to COVID.
Last week, there was another large hotel chain that 18,000 were let go.
I haven't seen any jobs that are even close to what I was making.
We're trying to keep things as normal for our kids. I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son.
And I see every day people losing their homes, having to leave Las Vegas.
If I have to start over somewhere else, I'll have to start over.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.